Tonight, I'm here to say goodbye to all of you.
We lost everything! We had to pay the price! Yeah, we lost everything! We had to pay the price!
The important part in Cyberpunk is not technology, it's the feel.
It's like, who are you? How do you want to play the character?
This is kind of the role-playing freedom we want to give. But you know, as always, it can also have consequences for you.
Cyberpunk. Before it was a game, it was a genre. And before it was a genre, it was a mess of emergent ideas in sci-fi literature through the 60s, 70s, and beyond. Where the scientific achievement of the 20th century inspired early sci-fi writers to explore distant futures and utopian societies in their work, the Vietnam War, emerging drug culture, civil unrest, and a growing resistance to establishment and authority fueled authors like Philip K. Dick, Bruce Sterling, and Walter John Williams to envision a future that was far more pessimistic. Dystopian societies replete with life-changing technology, but severe economic and political disparity brought on by an all-powerful elite. Simply put, high-tech, low-life. A storytelling environment rife for social commentary on capitalism, transhumanism, social inequality, and the human condition. Each writer brought something new to the genre, which would then bleed into the work of another author. Cybernetic implants, androids, cyberspace, punk hackers, and a bit of film noir for good measure. Much of the genre's visual language was informed by Ridley Scott's Blade Runner and Mobius's The Long Tomorrow, while the genre's storytelling was shaped by William Gibson's Neuromancer and Walter John Williams's Hardwired. Eventually, all of these works infused a young tabletop game developer in 1989 with the inspiration for a stylish new take on Dungeons & Dragons, Cyberpunk, the role-playing game of the dark future. And that game developer was Mike Pondsmith. Growing up with the evolution of the cyberpunk genre, Pondsmith's interest in technology, world news, and science fiction prepared him to build the retrofuturistic world of cyberpunk, a vision of 2013 seen from the 80s. Aside from being a timely iteration on D&D, Cyberpunk subverted many pen-and-paper mechanics for the time. Where most D&D campaigns encourage players to perform heroic actions, Cyberpunk encouraged players to commit crimes and be unlawful. The game embraced the rule of cool, where looking or doing cool mattered more than utility or plausibility, effectively turning a common criticism applied to the cyberpunk genre, style over substance, into a game mechanic. And most importantly, despite the peril of the world around you, Cyberpunk was not about saving the world.
It's about saving yourself.
The game was an underground hit, and propelled Pondsmith to make multiple additions in the years to come, such as Cyberpunk 2020. Over the years, as he cultivated experience in the video game industry, Pondsmith dreamed of turning Cyberpunk into a video game, and met with multiple publishers in the hopes of a licensing agreement. Every single time, the publisher only wanted to deviate from his vision. As Pondsmith approached his 60s, it was safe to say a deal would never happen. But then, fate intervened. In 2012, Pondsmith received a call from CD Projekt, the company behind the critically acclaimed The Witcher 1 and 2. They weren't just your average publisher. They were fans, people who actually played Cyberpunk, an unlikelihood for a country that fell behind the communist Iron Curtain and barely had access to games like Cyberpunk when it was first released in the West. As Dreams had it, as well as Pondsmith and CDPR, it was finally time to make a Cyberpunk video game.
Black holes living inside of your face, razor wire spinning around you, around you, around you, around.
On January 10th, 2013, game studio CD Projekt Red burst forth with the magnificent teaser trailer for Cyberpunk 2077. I was 13 years old when I first saw this thing, man. And for some reason, I never forgot it. A bleak future run amok with violence, super cops, and cyber psychos. Paired with Archive's bullets, it left a truly chilling impression. And that was the whole idea. One of the reasons CDPR announced Cyberpunk when it did was because it needed to expand the studio if it were to fulfill their lofty vision for the game. What better way to recruit developers than to put out a flashy teaser? The effort paid off. By 2014, the team behind Cyberpunk 2077 grew to around 50 developers from all over the world, an international team for an internationally minded game. However, it would be a long time before Cyberpunk 2077 would return to the spotlight. CDPR had more immediate fish to fry, particularly a little game called
The Witcher 3.
The wonderful Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
Go out and buy this game right now.
It has permanently changed the way I play, interact with, and appreciate video games.
That's why it's Game of the Year.
a miracle. Despite the previous hurdles of The Witcher 1 and 2, CDPR's inexperience as a studio, and greater inexperience with the open world genre, their largely unsung status in the games industry, and multiple frustrating delays, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt went on to be one of the most widely beloved and critically acclaimed games of all time. A monumental, genre-defining RPG with brilliant storytelling and characters, a gripping open world and atmosphere, hours upon hours of engaging content, and an unforgettable experience. It's also my favorite game of all time. Never before had a studio garnered so much praise with so few games under their belt. The Witcher 3 should never have worked. But not only had it worked, it changed the way RPG and open world developers have approached their games for the better part of the last 5 years. CDPR had earned their acclaim, and it gave them the exact momentum they needed to take on Cyberpunk 2077. So, why Cyberpunk? Why get excited for a single-player RPG in a futuristic Blade Runner-esque world made by CD Projekt Red? In asking the question, I think you'll have your answer. The cyberpunk genre may have already had its fair share of video games through the last 3 decades, but none with the same scale, depth, or potential as a game from the studio behind The Witcher 3. Co-directed by Anna Badowski and Mateusz Kanik, both of whom had been with the studio since The Witcher 1, written by Tomasz Marchuka, Jakub Żalnik, under the story direction of Marcin Blaha, all veterans of The Witcher 3, music composed by Witcher 3 maestros Marcin Przybyszewicz, P.T. Adamczyk, and renowned TV composer Paul Leonard Morgan, and the art director of Final Fantasy XV and Blade Runner Blackout 2022, Paul Chedison. The creative effort behind Cyberpunk would be dynamite. Though CDPR would be diving into the deep end of a subgenre of storytelling and gameplay they had no experience in, this was arguably where they did their best work. Their games have always been ambitious, but Witcher 3 was perhaps proof that their skill in game design had finally caught up to their ambition. And unlike the Witcher trilogy, which was largely disowned by Witcher book author Andrzej Sapkowski, Cyberpunk benefited from not only having its creator on board, but the years of experience in the games industry Pondsmith had as well. Cyberpunk was going to work. In late 2016, CDPR was issued a $7 million research grant by the Polish government for the development of multiplayer, dynamic AI, and reactive city creation technology that changed based on the player's decisions. During the loot box fiasco of 2017, when rumors arose that CDPR was considering a live service model for Cyberpunk, they pushed back. We leave greed for others. A bold proclamation, and no less expected from the same studio that popularized the free DLC model following The Witcher 3. The same studio that struck down fallacious Glassdoor reviews months prior, many of which made claims of unnecessary crunch, low pay, and poor studio morale. You can tempt fate, but you can't tarnish CDPR's reputation. In 2018, Cyberpunk 2077 made its grand re-unveiling at E3 with a thrilling blaze of fire into Night City. Behind closed doors, the press had their first look at gameplay. A few months later, that gameplay was shown to the public. And over the next 2 years, they would be seeing a lot more.
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
Alright, I was expecting the unexpected, but I didn't expect Keanu fucking Reeves, and amidst the explosion of his popularity in 2019 no less, CDPR had the world eating from its palm, and planned to keep it fed all the way to Cyberpunk's release date of April 2020. I was bummed because it was going to come out during my finals, but then it got delayed to September 2020. You can't rush perfection after all. That didn't just become the slogan of Cyberpunk's development, but of 2020 as well. The onset of COVID-19 changed everything, and straddled the entertainment industry the world over. By the summer, Cyberpunk was delayed, again, from September to November 19th. That's still close to my finals, but whatever, okay. A long wait became longer, yet CDPR kept its audience engaged in the build-up to the game's release with Night City Wire, a monthly content dump interviewing the creative forces behind the game. As months of waiting became weeks, hype levels virtually shattered the ceiling. Musical spotlights, Cyberpunk-branded merch, and content creator cameos dominated the game's social media craze. Every gamer had something to say about Cyberpunk, and nearly all of it was ineffably positive. Then, one final delay, from November 19th to December 10th. Alright CDPR, it's basically releasing smack in the middle of my finals now, but whatever, you already have my money. They had it all the way to Best Buy, with a Mobius-inspired steelbook, Night City postcards, and a physical thank you letter. This is why I love CD Projekt Red. They care about the consumer. And I, along with the rest of the world, was about to experience their greatest gift yet, Cyberpunk 2077, at long last. But not nearly long enough. Night City. It's a city of dreams, and I'm a big dreamer. Yet I could never dream of any studio achieving quite what CD Projekt Red did with Night City. A multi-layered agglomeration of dizzying, interlocking skyscrapers piercing the heavens, bright protruding neon billboards and signs, and brutalist concrete modules stacked over each other to show decades of commercial realty in action. Only the rich can dream of what the city must look like from the sky, but for the average miscreant, subjugated to the darkened, grimy streets and alleyways on the bottom, any privileged view is all but blocked out by the extravaganza above. Residents are crammed into gargantuan megablocks sustaining hundreds of people, likely inspired by Hong Kong's social housing projects through the 1970s and 80s. On the whole, those decades apply appropriately well to the aesthetics of cyberpunk. Big blocky retro-futuristic car design, an overabundance of flashy leather clothing, displaying a bout of arcade machines, punk afros and jewelry, and of course, the iconic motifs of the cyberpunk genre, cyberware, cyberbikes, cyber samurai, are all here. The more you roam about Night City, the more you realize this isn't 2077 for our world. Rather, much like the genre it's based on, this is the near future of the 80s, set almost 100 years later to afford CDPR enough storytelling freedom to not interfere in the events of Pondsmith's RPGs. And most dazzlingly, all of this is fictional, created from the ground up with nothing but its rich inspirations to go off of. The decision to let players experience this in first person makes complete sense. Though I can appreciate distance and horizontal depth in the frame from third person, it's only in first person that skyscrapers feel this massive. You are quite literally looking up, a mere ant crawling through the crack of a sidewalk, and that feeling is largely due to the immersion of this perspective. If this is Pondsmith's pen and paper game brought to life, then you must be a participant in this experience. It makes sense to be removed from Geralt in the third person, or tagging along for his journey. But the story of V is the story of you. Though the control offered to the player in first person is overwhelming at first, no other creative decision throughout the entire game brings you closer to your story.
You could have warned me how much it hurts to die.
Trust me, real death hurts much, much more.
Not so sure about that.
My first jaunt through Night City left me with two unshakable impressions. One, the production value. Like, holy fuck, man. We can already imagine the creative labor poured into the construction of the city alone. But how about the sheer variety and bombasticity of ads assaulting the player? The ever-abhorrent windows into a hyper-commercialized future, where people are objectified, artificiality is glorified, and fears are stoked to turn profits. The constant radio chatter playing in your apartment and over your commutes, always at work to normalize the lunacy of this world. Over 150 completely original genre-bending songs over several radio stations, featuring the likes of Run the Jewels, Grimes, Ratboy, Eugen Blackrock, and so many other artists I've never even heard of, all participating in an experiment to create music that's decades ahead of its time. The wide array of car brands and models, all with their own defining features, distinct cultural influences, and meticulous construction, almost as if all these cars were handcrafted by their own engineers. Some of them probably were. An endless variation of clothing and high-tech weaponry, a D&D lore's book worth of excellently written and sometimes hilarious data shards spread throughout the city. and of course, the general visual gloss of the game's beautiful graphics. When the right elements are operating as intended, you are granted an indescribably transportive experience. The sights and sounds of the future, wind, rain, the buzz of NPCs, 3 different radios all playing different music and news shows on the same street, deep electronic sounds quaking from overhead, an unbeatable immersion. When they're not operating as intended, the outcome is less impressive. And that leads me to my second impression of Night City: the glitches. Everyone loves the occasional glitch, a T-posing NPC, a flying car, janky animation, or dumb AI. But not all at once, and not as frequently as they occur in Cyberpunk. The last time I played a game with this many glitches on launch might have been Assassin's Creed Unity, not the game I'd ever imagined comparing to a CD Projekt Red title. At first, it was easy to dismiss the state of utter glitchy chaos permeating Cyberpunk, but over time, it's much harder. Sometimes, a few innocent glitches and fewer seconds is all it takes to dismantle a well-built sense of immersion in the game world. Open-world titles on the scale of Cyberpunk are no stranger to these types of bugs, and even veering back through CDPR's history with launch titles, it's little surprise how prevalent they are here. Still, it's a shame they were so inseparable from my experience with the game, and perhaps an indication that Cyberpunk probably should have been delayed just a bit longer. Why are you taking pictures of it with your non-existent phone? Hold out my hand, click. I wish I could do that with my hand. Glitches or not, the show must go on. And so it did. Just as the Witcher games bent the RPG genre to put players in the boots of Geralt of Rivia, CDPR indulges the fantasy of Pondsmith's pen and paper game as an action RPG in 2077, complete with character building, gearing, tactical combat, and the preservation of choices and consequences. To test the role-playing limits of Cyberpunk, I created 2 characters, one inspired by Ryan Gosling and the other by Emma Stone. Hopefully this played out more like La La Land and not Gangster Squad. There was only 2 ways to find out. CDPR puts arguably their best idea up front. Life Paths, a system that takes the backstory element of pen and paper RPGs and applies it to your choice of 3 predetermined prologues: Corpo, Nomad, and Street Kid. Of course, many CRPGs already beat Cyberpunk to this idea in recent years, but elevated to a fully voiced cinematic level, the prospect of having 3 totally distinct backstories that affect your approach to the narrative is pretty unprecedented. Corpo puts you in the Oxfords of a rich but altogether pathetic and heavily nauseated paper pusher for Arasaka. Nomad gives you a clean slate, a gearhead outrunning the law Dukes of Hazzard style. Street Kid embraces the bloodied-nosed, down-on-their-luck underdog persona. At some point, the 3 prologues converge on the same main narrative path, and the way each path gets to that point has mixed results, but they do give you a sense of personal ownership of your character nonetheless. Together, the dichotomy of these paths plant you in Cyberpunk's thematic playground. The American dream. The idea that anyone, regardless of their status or where they come from, can achieve upward mobility and follow their dreams. It's a romantic idea, but rarely a plausible one. Least of all in the cyberpunk genre, where society is dominated by megacorporations and most people live in poverty, oppressed by a cycle of exploitive labor and mindless consumerism, a dystopic, late-stage capitalism nightmare. Cyberpunk 2077 is not evaluating whether or not the American dream is dead. It's evaluating what happens to a society that refuses to accept when it dies. And for the journey V embarks on, it's an evaluation of what happens to the individual who tries to pursue it. Obviously, it's not going to go well. Though the Nomad prologue glimpses an optimistic arrival in Night City, the Corpo demonstrates just how easy it is to fall down the bureaucratic ladder, while the Street Kid denotes how hard it is to leave the bottom. Though your apartment is considerably spacious for the crammed megablocks of the future, far nicer high-rise apartments seemingly mock you miles from your window. And despite how long you spent crafting your very own V in the character creator, assigning specific stats, and considering your long-term success in the game, V is no less expendable than any one person roaming the streets of Night City. Not to its corporate overlords, anyway. To feel small and be small in a city so big, there's only one way to stand out. Become a Night City legend, and secure a bulletproof legacy of your own, by any means necessary.
Hey, hermano. Your new life, it starts now.
Depending on your life path, you've either known Jackie your whole life, or a solid afternoon. Either way, he becomes your best friend and the lighthouse of your trek to stardom in Night City. Jackie is the unquestionable heart and soul of the game's first act. He's charismatic, he's a gunslinger, and he's got stars in his eyes. Jason Hightower breathes incredible presence into this character and effectively swoons you into the same Night City fantasy he's so infatuated with. Luckily, our ticket to the major leagues is just around the corner. Jackie secures us a meeting with Dexter Deshawn, one of Night City's top fixers. The gig? Steal a prototype chip, the relic, from Yorinobu Arasaka, the black sheep son of the Emperor Saburo Arasaka. Naturally, some prep work is in order, starting with procuring a flathead device from Maelstrom. So far, Cyberpunk has demonstrated choice and consequence through superficial character creation, but not through gameplay agency. Not until the pickup.
You'll pay twice, because I say you'll pay twice.
Despite how inconsequential your actions are to the upper echelon of this world, the very phenomenon that allowed Corpo V to be kicked down the ladder can render your choices meaningful. In the right situation, you could deliver someone's next big score, or be the harbinger of their demise. And in the pickup, you could be Miltech's board killer, or the reason Meredith Stout is unceremoniously offed for her insubordination off-screen. It all depends on the choices you make. Do you meet with Miltech beforehand, take their credit chip and use it to buy the flathead, provoking Maelstrom with a virus hidden on the card? Or do you wipe the virus and watch Miltech spiral into panic as their plan is foiled? Or do you just walk in, buy the flathead, and walk out unscathed? That is the power of your choice, and it's not exclusively presented in the dialogue either. It considers the eddies you might have earned performing jobs before the pickup, your aptitude in the hacking minigame, and if you even took the time to meet Stout in the first place. The multi-layered approach to choice in this quest resolves to extend considerably well across the game. In gameplay, are you a guns-blazing solo, favoring head-on assault and hard-hitting weaponry? Are you a net runner, leaving a trail of bodies without ever firing a bullet? Maybe you're a melee ninja, adept at cutting down your foes with bladed fury. Or you're something of a hitman, pacifying foes and hiding bodies as you chart a path through an environment. Are you a hybrid of some of these builds, or a jack of all trades? Again, the choice is yours, and it's wonderfully afforded by an attribute system with dozens of perks spread across several trees. On my first V, I was a melee quick hack hybrid, sabotaging enemies' vitals to easily chop them down with my katana. On my second V, I was a hybrid of cold blood and assault, a self-sufficient wrecking ball that moved and healed faster the more I killed. Through cyberware mods, you can elevate V to superhuman levels, sometimes literally. And because of your attributes, you might unlock hidden pathways or secret rooms in an environment, or qualify for a conversation skill check that unlocks new branches of dialogue. Players who take advantage of their character build and attributes will reap the greatest rewards in dungeon-like side mission gigs. The outcome of boss and cyber psycho fights depend on your proclivity for either lethal or non-lethal. And of course, quests both within and outside the narrative sport multiple endings based on your decisions. No matter how I navigated Cyberpunk, the value of choice and ensuing consequence boasted promising depth for what would hopefully be a long time to come.
But now we can also say, okay, players have all of these different choices to solve a situation, so of course there should also sometimes be some consequences, and not just on the gameplay side how you solve it, but of course, the story should react to it.
With the flathead secured, and Yorinobu's penthouse scrolled through in Evelyn Parker's brain dance, V and Jackie are finally brought to the heist.
Thank you. Excelsior package activated.
Excelsior? Oh, this just keeps getting better.
Since William Gibson's Neuromancer, the heist has become a fixture of the cyberpunk genre, a desperate attempt by underdog criminals to achieve the high life, using cutting-edge technology and cunning against their oppressors. CDPR honors this cyberpunk tradition no less reverently. From the dimly lit planning room, the classy limo, to the Royal Konpeki Plaza lobby, where the player is permitted to scout out their surroundings, the heist truly feels like one of Cyberpunk's more special missions, one in which every feeling is deliberately evoked. It's also where you find Hideo Kojima's in-game character, which feels like a fitting tribute to the creator of one of the earliest Cyberpunk video games, Snatcher. I digress. The heist both physically and figuratively actualizes upward mobility. The closer you get to the relic, the closer you are to the big score, the major leagues. Challenges abound, but nothing that you didn't prepare for. Finally, you arrive at the top. The relic is yours. But this wouldn't be Cyberpunk if you had a happy ending. And in a world where anyone can get knocked down the social ladder in an instant, you're about to be jolted off with violent force. A shot at the major leagues is now a race to the bottom, in every conceivable way. Stealth or guns blazing, it doesn't matter. You're far too insignificant in the story to alter the outcome. You and Jackie are practically ants scurrying from the crushing weight of a boot, and you would be foolish to think both of you are getting out of this intact. In Night City, this is the inevitable fate of anyone who dares turn against their corporate tyrants. The bright, beaming heart and soul of Cyberpunk is snuffed. The euphoric high of the heist against the perilous low of Jackie's death feels like the culmination of a nightmare, but we have yet to see what comes next. Adam Zick's score cuts off as we enter the no-tell motel, a palpable sense of dread overshadowing everything. If you thought even for a second that Dex was on your side, that you and him have some sort of equal standing, you're dead wrong. You, V, were never special.
No blaze of glory for me.
The saga of V has come to an end. Or did it?
Fuck.
Fuck.
After ripping down the latent memories of Johnny Silverhand's suicide mission against Arasaka, crawling our zombified body out of a putrid wasteland of trash, as death-defying rescue from the Emperor's dishonored bodyguard, and Vic's grim death sentence for V, the nuttiest one-hour rollercoaster of a 2020 video game comes to a breathtaking stop in our apartment, our only bastion of safety. Yet it's here we come face to face with the walking, talking, shit-spewing engram of Johnny Silverhand, who is actively overriding our brain. They say you should never meet your heroes, but Johnny's a truly special case. As the rocker boy legend of Night City, Johnny is every bit as vile, narcissistic, and morally bankrupt as the cut of disenfranchised lowlifes the city is engineered to produce. Where Night City's corporate overlords quietly amassed more and more power over its impoverished populace, Johnny was the lone man shouting expletives into the whirlwind, an unhinged terrorist with the compulsion to fearlessly burn every corpse to the ground. He'll never back down, he'll never stop fighting, and he'll never leave you alone.
Leave me the fuck alone.
Johnny's abrasive demeanor, the timing in which he shows up in your life, and his functional position as your new best friend after Jackie's passing is all deliberate. You are supposed to loathe Johnny, this person who's poised to seal your life without any rightful claim to it. Keanu Reeves appropriately plays up the Tyler Durden-esque snobbery, as do the writers lean into the god complex of a real Night City legend. This is your dream literally staring you dead in the eye, armpit hair and all. Someone who succeeded at becoming the thing you and Jackie died for. And boy, has it never looked uglier. For me personally, this all had the intended effect. I hated Johnny, and the more he invaded my life, the more I feared for my own. The more I felt the inescapable panic of watching my hopes and dreams slip away, my shot at true greatness, the whole of my life ahead of me. Thus, while Act 1 had you and Jackie viewing Night City's legends through the lens of color-coded, nearsighted goggles, Act 2 humanizes the legend in all its ugliness. If you still want this life, be prepared to trade even more of your humanity for it, just as Johnny surrendered his to secure his legacy. Johnny's loathsome presence notwithstanding, the time bomb in our head is an obvious problem, and Goru Takamura might have a solution. Disavowed by Arasaka, Takamura wants revenge on Yorinobu, and knows you are living witness to his patricide. In helping him, you might gain access to the corpse technology and get the chip safely removed from your head. You may also find a more likely solution on the streets, either by searching for the biochip creator and renegade Anders Hellman, or by tracking down Evelyn to her original clients for the chip. Time is of the essence, and our life is on the line, so we'll chase down every lead we can. But because this is an RPG, there's something I care about a little bit more at the moment. The open world.
You don't believe in no fate. every day digging the grave.
Though Cyberpunk may have Fallout 4 syndrome, giving you a time-sensitive main quest while also dangling hours of open-world content in front of your face, it's the wanton pursuit of the fixer fantasy that somewhat validates the dive into Cyberpunk side content, and the beginning of Act 2 is the perfect time to do just that. As you explore Night City and enter new districts, you'll receive calls from a colorful assortment of big-time fixers, all looking to give you merc work. These are the gigs we mentioned earlier, and some vary quite significantly. Convince a corrupt cop to leave the city, steal a prized ride from a rival gang, rescue a client from captivity, or cross someone's name off a list. Meanwhile, the NCPD has their hands full of, well, crime, and you might be the tidal wave of change to clean the streets. As your street cred soars, so do the number of missions you're offered with. Delamain HQ goes on a malfunction panic as multiple personality Delamain vehicles descend on the streets. A quest to unlock the secrets hidden on the decrypted cybertech of the legendary Bartmoss with Nyx. Or a covered-up conspiracy about the fate of Night City's fallen mayor. All the while, you're collecting more and more eddies, acquiring new gear, finding new rides, and indulging in the true cyberpunk fantasy. And all the while, through every quest and gig, Johnny Silverhand continues to breathe down your neck, constantly interfering in your judgment, promoting apathy, and mocking any attempt to form a connection to the people in this world.
Should just ignore you.
And you're a walking corpse. Should just wait till your mind shrivels to nothing and frees up space for me.
The more you interact with him, the more you realize the extent to which he sold his humanity. For in Night City, everything has a cost. But in a society so irreversibly fucked by capitalist machinations, everything has a cost. For Johnny, it was the cost of damnation. And for the rest of Cyberpunk, well, take a look. Initially, I presumed the most glaring of Cyberpunk's issues began and ended with its bugs, for which there were many. But through Act 2, a curtain hiding dozens of greater failures across Cyberpunk was slowly unveiled to me. Earlier I spoke highly of CDPR's dedication to preserve choice and consequence throughout much of the game, all in the spirit of Pondsmith's tabletop RPG. I was impressed by the web of outcomes in the pickup, the versatility of choice through the player's actions, the variety of sportable character builds, and the side content used to enforce choice and consequence to the player. But this far into the experience, a different impression began to form. About everything. Early on, life paths pose to reveal new dialogue branches, and depending on the NPC, your unique life path might open doors otherwise closed to other life paths. The truth is not this glamorous. Life paths are about as consequential as asking a store vendor how business has been going. It never matters, no matter where you go. The multiple endings woven into the pickup is one of the rare few quests in the game to support so many different outcomes, and is not representative of the greater whole. Don't get me wrong. Not every quest can have sprawling choices and outcomes, especially if we consider how CDPR approached choice in The Witcher 3. But to feature them so early on in the game with the pickup, and so infrequently after that, is certainly disappointing. Disappointing how a game based on one of the first pen and paper games to honor the rule of cool offers absolutely no way for the player to change the cosmetic appearance of their gear, their facial appearance, their acquired vehicles, or their weapons. If you want good stats, you are going to look like a dork. Moreover, the world around you won't care that you look like a dork, creating a strange clash in character role-playing and world interaction. It's disappointing how uninteresting alternate pathways unlocked by your specific attributes can end up being. Not like the Deus Ex series, where alternate pathways are not only unique, but tailored flavorfully to your skills. It's disappointing how meaningless eliminating enemies in lethal or non-lethal actually is. There's no apparent system tracking how you defeat enemies, and no incentive to pursue one option over the other, with the exception of a quest from Regina Jones, where she gives you more eddies if you left more cyber psychos alive than dead. Well gee, that changes everything, Regina. It's disappointing how ineffectual most character builds become over time. Not that they aren't useful, especially on harder difficulties and after you've maxed out a build, but most at-level combat encounters can be easily won with the common pistol looted off an enemy. Late into the game, there's never an appropriate shift in enemy types nor difficulty to accommodate for the advancement of your skills. And it's disappointing how in a game driven by choice, gameplay encounters are rarely reactive to that choice. The enemy AI in Cyberpunk seems only to know how to take cover and shoot, with the occasional enemy that has more interesting abilities to work with. There's never a moment where enemies react according to your gameplay approach, giving combat encounters a static, predictive flow. But the lack of reaction doesn't stop at the enemies. Remember that grant CDPR received to develop dynamic AI and city technology that changes based on your decisions? You would be hard-pressed to find meaningful proof of either in Cyberpunk. Heck, you'd be hard-pressed to find AI that reacts anything like NPCs in most AAA games, which doubly goes for Cyberpunk's bafflingly cobbled-together police and wanted system, where cops spawn directly behind you for a crime and disappear as soon as you drive half a mile away. For a game with such an engaging atmosphere, there's no understating the lifeless technology that works effortlessly to diffuse it. That barrier to engagement is further compounded by a nigh-illegible open-world map, where the vomit of colorful icons not only overwhelms, but misleads. Gig's side quest and vehicle offers all share the same icon, despite how different they are, while police hustle scans assault the map with derivative, grindy busywork. Where The Witcher 3 maintained a healthy balance of missions from quest givers and emergent quests and exploration, Cyberpunk essentially forbids you from picking up almost any quest beforehand, nor having a say in accepting any of the gigs you drive past in the world, as fixers bombard you with unskippable phone calls and walls of expositional text. And none of this is to even reiterate on Cyberpunk's unrelenting cascade of glitches, a constant deterrence against the complete sense of immersion a world with as much depth as Night City so rightly deserves. In Night City, everything has a cost. And for CDPR, the cost was Night City itself. To say a longer delay would have resolved these issues would demonstrate a misunderstanding of Cyberpunk's problems. These aren't just the result of poor direction nor rushed development, but the mixture of these things. In trying to climb Mount Everest as quickly as possible, CDPR lost their way and paid the price. The effort consumed them, just as Night City consumes those who embrace it. And for trusting CDPR's lofty claims about the game prior to release, I paid a hefty sum of my own. To be struck by such a mesmerizing first impression, only for it to rapidly deteriorate over the game's most critical stretch, bothered me something awful. I continued to build my character, explore, complete missions, and attempt engagement with the world in the second act, but always with the expectation to be disappointed, to be disconnected, to be consumed by shame. All I really needed was an escape.
It was completely dark, empty, not a star in the sky. All I heard was the wind and a few engines in the distance. And I sat here waiting for the world to fall away, for my mind's RPM to drop to 0.
Did it?
No. I realized that night it wouldn't happen again. That my mind would always be on the road, even while I was sitting, freezing on a cliff.
By itself, Night City can feel as hopeless as the dreamers who wander there, crushed by their ambitions. But sometimes, it's only from a distance that we can make peace with our suffering. And that's exactly what I got with the Badlands, where the rejects of Night City come to play songs around the campfire, drink booze, and gaze at the stars. The Badlands may suffer from a lot of the same glitch-filled emptiness that permeates Night City, but wrapped up by the sun-soaked surroundings, the flares of dust and wind, and the melancholic score, I couldn't help but feel nostalgic for a past I never participated in. A place where dreams and dreamers go to rest, a populace of rusted cogs in a capitalist machine, just as burnt as the landscape they find themselves in. In the Badlands, I found my escape, if not just for a moment, and that was all I needed to be reminded of Cyberpunk's hidden beauty. The type of beauty that's tragically inaccessible for the majority of the characters in this world, and for the Badlands in particular, inaccessible to Pan Am Palmer.
I don't know. Shit!
Growing up in a world deprived of resources and stability, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the clan she called family, the strain of trying to survive in a ruthless world eventually puts Pan Am at odds with the Aldecados, as Saul conflates ties of love with concerns of self-preservation. In Night City, she becomes frustratingly stuck, both in debt and isolation. Yet, it's your partnership with her that introduces you to the Badlands, an environment that defines Pan Am's free spirit. For Pan Am, the all-consuming corporate forces of this world cost her the freedom of the Badlands, and the stability and love of the Aldecados. Truthfully, the more you look around Cyberpunk, the more you'll realize the toll this society has extracted from everyone. Crippled by over-policing and disregarded by the justice of the law, the fate of Night City's communities are largely left in the hands of its gangs, like 6th Street in Santo Domingo or the Voodoo Boys in Pacifica. In opposing Night City's corrupt corporate structure, the Peralez family becomes victims of sinister espionage, and eventually lose agency over their thoughts and actions. Burdened by the demand of running a whole company, and the ineffective, cost-reductive infrastructure to support it, Delamain goes helplessly haywire. Left destitute by Yorinobu's reign in the Arasaka family, Takemura is returned to the streets, a paralyzing environment not unlike the one he grew up in. And much like Johnny Silverhand, the still living legends of Night City, like Rogue or Atom Smasher, have traded nearly every shred of their humanity for immortality. Among our allies, Evelyn Parker faces a tragic demise for her failure to deliver the relic. Passed from the Clouds, a club that deprives men and women of control over their bodies, to Fingers, a degenerate punk who uses his position to exploit his patients, and then to a gang of scavs that abuse Evelyn for BDs, the pursuit of upward mobility cost Evelyn more than what she had left to lose.
What part is dead, don't you understand? No, she was not pronounced dead by trauma team. If she'd have had coverage, we wouldn't be talking.
This type of physical grief doesn't end with Evelyn either. Cyber psychos are products of the effects of physical grief. Joy toys and sex workers are inhumanly exploited, and the city's general obsession with body implants strip individuals of their natural beauty. And for being even remotely complicit in her schemes, Judy loses Evelyn, one of her closest, deepest friends in the world. For participating in the violent, largely uncontrolled Night City death races, Claire loses her husband, and only by the rules of the game. Enveloped by drug addiction, River Ward's nephew is coerced by a truly sadistic soul, a man perpetuating the torturous void instilled in him by his abusive dairyman father. And River himself, after fraying the bonds with his sister's family, loses his position with the NCPD for even daring to illustrate care within its compromised system. Even V and Jackie suffer the consequences of tempting Night City's social ladder, a loss that weighs heavily on Misty, Vic, the Wells family, and you.
When you go to war as a boy, you have a great illusion of immortality. Other people get killed, not you. Then, when you are badly wounded the first time, you lose that illusion.
The sum of devastation is numbing, and corrupts the souls of all those who suffer through it. Left to grapple with her newfound emptiness and her boiling contempt for all those who betrayed Evelyn, Judy consults our help to kill Forrest. Claire implores us to throw the last win of our race just so she can kill the man who offed her husband. River wishes nothing more than to violently punish his nephew's kidnapper, and Pan Am is determined to retaliate against Raph and Shiv for the theft of her car. Heck, even Yorinobu, embittered by the absence of love within the Arasaka family and the cold hostility in place of it, feels left with no choice but to perpetuate that hostility towards Saburo in the most lethal way possible. In a world run by greed and the commodification of body, mind, and humanity, all are made to feel dispensable. And so, to attach purpose to their suffering, they act to correct the scales of justice in the universe. But this is a reaction to grief, and not the one that invokes catharsis. Rather, where characters find some semblance of peace is where I found it in the Badlands, in fleeting moments of escapism. Going diving with Judy through the deafening depths of her flooded childhood home, stewing jambalaya and kicking it back on Haywood's water tower with River, and the quiet comfort of a broken down shack with Pan Am. It's one of the reasons I fell embarrassingly in love with this tragically digital character. Pan Am's arc is one of the few in the game where you can bring her closer to peace, where you can help mend ties with her clan, and restore love. Something she's hesitant to accept for fear she'll lose it again. And really, with all these characters, V's intervention restores something to these characters' lives. That though your partnership is often based on necessity or the removal of the biochip, the defiance of real human connection adds new meaning to V's life. Through all of Act 2, you've been deciding what to make of your grief and what Night City has taken from you. Not just Jackie, but the unification of your body, mind, and soul, all of which you now share with Johnny. At times, you've pursued the connection we just described. At other times, you've perhaps continued to chase status or vengeance. And in key intervals, Johnny has intervened to suggest what he thinks will bring you fulfillment. You can side with him or against him, and for me personally, though I always felt Johnny was right to rail so heavily against the corporate oppressors of Night City, I never vibed with his misanthropic anger. I always viewed it as a reflection of his detachment from humanity, which he willingly gave away. But in cyberspace, momentarily removed from V, I saw his rawest truth.
Get out of my way. Oh, come on, don't do this. Fuck! Are you still rolling?
Stop that! You have to kill him? Johnny, she's dead.
The well of hatred that defines Johnny Silverhand is grief. It's trauma and regret. It doesn't justify how he treats people, as he was an asshole long before the loss of Alt. But now that we can finally see what Night City took from Johnny, we can finally humanize the legend for what it really is. Human. Not only was Johnny's suicide mission on Arasaka motivated by Alt, but his hatred for the establishment and cynicism towards reality, both of which stem from years of service in corporate wars, where he experienced firsthand how expendable he was to his masters.
Was in Mexico when I realized that no matter the conflict, corps always win. Ordinary people always lose.
Just when I thought Johnny was merely the mischievous devil on your shoulder, calling out V's naivety and hypocrisy a la Kreia from Knights of the Republic 2, the latter chunk of Act 2 amazingly recontextualizes his character, and helps you to understand how, beneath his abrasive exterior, Johnny is a deeply broken man. Soul Killer may have very well shattered his soul, with no way to ever put the pieces back together. Yet, slivers of his humanity still reflect off the shards, the determination to be the master over his own fate, just as he wants for you to be the master over your own. Which is why, when the time comes, he'll accept his deletion with dignity. You're both in this fight together, and it's against the Arasaka executives who doomed you both in the first place. Once again, you can choose to contest that, but there's no denying what needs to be done. The biochip must be removed, and if we can't figure out how to do that, and soon, Night City will destroy us. By the game's third act, the dust on my Cyberpunk impressions had all but settled. A staggering set of problems that go deeper than a sea of bugs or glitches, but poor direction and design toward a mountain of ambition CDPR couldn't scale before deciding to release their game. If you maintained a successful state of denial to these problems up to this point in your playthrough, the slim offerings of Act 3 will certainly evoke suspicion. Questlines that implied a climactic finish, such as the Perales family mind control quest, seem to trail off into a cliffhanger. It's unclear whether this is because these questlines will be continued in a future DLC or expansion, if their latter parts weren't finished in time for release, or if it will be released in a future DLC because it wasn't finished in time. Each life path is given a unique quest to tie into its respective prologue, but these quests are pathetically dispensable, especially the Corpo's quest.
Have a nice night, V. I'll be at home.
That's it? Really? And throughout much of the game, and the world itself, there is an inescapable trail of cut content, such as a 6th character attribute, locked interiors throughout the city, and a massive, inaccessible area of unfinished buildings and streets in Pacifica. There's also a long list of features shown or discussed in the game's 2018 and 2019 press appearances that didn't make it into the game, such as wall-climbing mantis blades, a flathead companion, a more in-depth street cred system that was affected by your clothing, interactive ad terminals, a system that allowed players to change the appearance of their gear, and a garage beneath your apartment. I think it's important to consider how frequently developers are forced to cut content from their games, usually for budgetary, time, or design restrictions. But in the case of Cyberpunk, it certainly does an already glitchy, inherently flawed game no favors to exclude those ideas in the late game. I couldn't say I was surprised to see the game fizzle off into its third act. In a way, it was entirely fitting that as V approached the precipice of their decline, every moment and encounter seemed more and more fleeting. What did surprise me about Act 3 was how its first story mission is basically its last. In Danny O'Dwyer's 2017 docuseries on the Witcher games, writer Marcin Blaha expressed how CDPR tends to cut about 20% off the story for each of their games, what he considers a safe margin. In the context of a sprawling open-world narrative, it's not a terrible idea to trim down the story, something more games would probably benefit from, to be honest. But in Cyberpunk, it seems this cut story is in the run-up to its finale, which may have not been for the best. I could shrug off the emptiness of the rest of Act 3, but not this decision. Not until I gave Johnny one final all-night bender in Chippin' In.
Fuck, it's good to be back.
blood first thing every morning?
Talk about something else, please.
After sitting passenger to Johnny's absurd antics, Rogue and V team up to track down Atom Smasher. Legends hunting legends. The trail leads nowhere fast, but not without uncovering where Johnny's body was buried after Soul Killer. A toxic oil field, not unlike the wasteland V was dumped in earlier in the game. Despite their reassurance that he died a timeless symbol of rebellion, not even that is true. Arasaka still stands, people are more oppressed than ever, and the souls that did care about Johnny are few in number and all too bitter. And so, as I sat across from the digital projection of a once prideful rock star now on the verge of ego death, I couldn't help but feel a tear in my heart.
But let's say it was my real grave. What would you write? Here lies Johnny Silverhand.
The guy who saved my life.
V, you don't know how much I want that to be true.
Broken and humbled, Johnny comes to realize one truth we've long been aware of, and one we have not. There are no legends in Night City. Everyone is equally expendable. Those who lay claim to status traded their humanity to achieve it, and will wither from memory like dust in the Badlands when their time has come. The only thing that matters, and what V has only gleamed up to this point, is holding on to your humanity. To refuse the corporate machine from grinding a wedge between you and the people you care about. To form a real human connection with anyone. This world can kill your dreams, your body, your freedom, and your stability, but it must never take your soul. Just as Johnny came to this realization, I arrived at an epiphany of my own. Where I once saw the time bomb in V's brain as an obstacle to his pursuit of greatness, I now felt the pervasive dread of losing everyone I loved in Night City. Even though it already took so much from V, it's my memories I was scared of losing the most. Thus, what remained of Act 3 was dedicated to forging memories built to last, leaving no stone unturned, and staying in touch with all my friends, regardless of how distant they'd become. And now that Johnny and I were finally on the same page, I gave him the small comfort of making it up to the people he loved, which, not gonna lie, was pretty awesome. Unfortunately, no glory lasts forever. That finally leads us to the endings of Cyberpunk 2077.
Great, you checking out again?
Despite my disappointment in Cyberpunk's ultimate handling of choice and consequence, I think that here at the end, where choice arguably matters the most, CDPR absolutely nailed it, especially considering how many AAA games have bungled multiple endings in years past. V has no time left to spare. There's only enough medication left for one last ride, either for you or Johnny. Your fate is in your own hands, and that's more than what most of Night City can say for itself, including Jackie.
So what did Jackie decide up here?
Oh, you know. Gonna be a legend in this city. And I'm gonna leave you alone now.
If you followed only the main story up to this point, only two choices will be presented to you. Help Hanako usurp Yorinobu from Arasaka in exchange for the removal of your chip, or commit suicide. If you never took the time to form a connection with the people of this world, to guide V towards the thesis of humanity, there's no reason any other choice should be available to you. Either you will yourself as a tool for the corporate architects of Night City, or you accept the inevitable boot that has sought to crush you.
If we try anything else, people will die.
People die. It's the way of things.
Am I worth their sacrifice? Or you?
If you let Johnny make it up to Rogue, Carrie, and himself, Johnny will offer to take the wheel and drive headfirst into Arasaka with Rogue. Where Johnny once assaulted Arasaka with nothing but vengeful anger, he'll now have the purpose and fulfillment of saving your life, a selfless sacrifice. If you wait a few minutes and have maintained a positive relationship with Johnny up to this rooftop, accruing at least 70% affection or something, Johnny will actually volunteer to take on Arasaka by himself. You've been nicer to him than most, and have given him a second chance he's deeply grateful for. And more than anyone else, Johnny understands the danger of dragging innocent souls into Arasaka, people who deserve better than dying to corporate scum. If you took the time to help Panam reconnect with her nomad family and restore peace to her troubled life, she and the Aldecados will be at your beck and call. You gave Panam an invaluable gift. It only makes sense she'd want the same for you. Altogether, 4 different ways into Arasaka, 4 different epilogues, and 6 possible endings, with loads of small variation between them. The choices you make will define V's legacy. So, let's evaluate each one. The Devil. Though this option poses the best odds of survival, trusting Arasaka would go against everything this world has taught you. You've always been expendable to them, but because of the property in your head, you'll suddenly be special. As a corpo, there's something disturbingly comforting about gaining the Council's audience, like it's your twisted destiny. As a street kid or nomad, this feels more like turning to the dark side. Hanako's goal is not simply to remove her brother, who aims to start a corporate war that will raze his father's empire into cinders, but to reassert Saburo and his throne. Hanako may claim Arasaka upholds family above all else, but as we know from Yorinobu, this is only the deeply woven cognitive dissonance against a manipulative relationship based on fear. You stop Yorinobu from starting a war, give Saburo the key to immortality's biochip engram, and separate from Johnny, on extremely sour terms.
Oh, you'll regret it. Lose a friend and you always regret it.
You then awaken Arasaka's Space Center and embark on the road to recovery. Between impassive checkups from your doctor, the off-putting sterility of your room, fever dreams, and your isolation in space, reality starts to set in. This is purgatory. You've prolonged the oppression of mankind. Your closest contacts, what little you may have, are either unreachable or distraught. Your life was never saved. In fact, your life was meaningless. You made a deal with the devil, and now you pay the price. In the end, you can emerge from purgatory with one of 2 choices: sign a deal with the devil and be stored in metaphorical hell, or return to Earth, and with what little time you have, prove your soul is not gone for good. The Sun, or Temperance. Though Johnny used his second chance to let his living friends know what they meant to him, it's only in this ending that he achieves full reconciliation with Rogue. She's lived the empty, soulless life of a Night City legend for so long, but in one final blaze of glory, she can reconnect with Johnny and dismantle the corporate partnership that binds her. Johnny and Rogue ending this nightmare where it began seems fitting, especially if Chippin' In is blaring in the background. Atom Smasher may kill Rogue, but you can avenge her.
I killed the old cunt.
Storming into Arasaka solo is much harder, but arguably worth the risk. Nyx nor Rogue will have to die. Regardless, you'll unleash Alt on Mikoshi and inject V with Soul Killer. Once in cyberspace, you can honor your promise to V. Johnny will have been the master over his own fate and parts ways with you for good. Because you entrusted your life in the hands of Night City legends, you follow in their footsteps. You'll have the connections you formed, but not at your leisure. You'll live the fantasy you've dreamed of, but not for very long. And Mr. Blue Eyes may think there's a way to prolong your life, but the pursuit of greatness is a one-way trip. High above the mere mortals of Earth, there's only one thing that matters: finding a way back down to the people you love, or burn up like a rock hurtling towards the sun. However, this is only if Johnny honors his promise. What if, all along, this was not V's story, but Johnny's, where redemption was only the beginning? What if, in a new body, Johnny can become a new person and impart a new legacy, in a way no born-again soul could ever accomplish, not even V? The betrayal is heartbreaking, but arguably better than what happens to V in the Sun ending. There's no time limit on Johnny's life, nor a limit to the number of chances he has to screw up, but Johnny won't waste a single one. Not without the memory of the soul whose fate seemed too grim to bear. No longer to perpetuate the rage that consumed him for so long, Johnny finds an escape and forges a future full of hope. The Star. This is my personal favorite ending, and not just because it's the happiest. In fact, it might just be the most thematically consistent ending with what we've experienced in the tenets of Pondsmith's pen and paper game. When our journey began in Night City, either as an outsider, an overworked cog in a machine, or a soldier of fortune, we saw but one means to turn our life around: the American dream, the fantasy of the major leagues. Despite our damnedest efforts, the pursuit of our dreams destroyed us, returning us squarely to the bottom with the rest of an oppressed society. Jackie's absence has been numbing, though we've never been alone to the people who've suffered similar loss, not even with Johnny. When the weight of trudging through this hopeless reality felt the heaviest, we found the Badlands and Pan Am. For me and many of the nomads who roam there, the Badlands are an escape. And in taking the time to help her both reconnect with the Aldecados and reclaim her stability and freedom, we helped Pan Am escape there all the same. Since then, we've helped everyone find an escape in some small way, resulting in lasting, soulful fulfillment. In the words of Mike Pondsmith, Cyberpunk is not about saving the world, it's about saving yourself. And to me, there's no ending that more sensibly honors that thesis than the one in which you entrust your nomad family to help free you from Night City. This was particularly fitting with my corporal life path, as it felt like I was chasing the liberation I've always deserved. It may not fulfill the circular storytelling of Johnny breaking into Arasaka as he did 50 years earlier, but there is power to how these common people use the tech of their oppressors to strike a blow against them. Within cyberspace, there's something profoundly fitting about reminiscing with Johnny at the diner table, where you two first hatched a plan of survival all that time ago. Now, you both harbor a far greater respect for each other than ever before. However, as is also the case in Pondsmith's Tenets, there are no completely happy endings in Cyberpunk. In every ending except Johnny's, you have but 6 months to live, and here in the Star ending, where the promised line of the horizon is the greatest, this revelation is perhaps the most crushing to bear. You can give it up to Johnny and enter the Black Wall on your own volition, unlike the previous setup where you let Johnny take V's body. But the reason I chose Pan Am and the Aldecados was for my escape, and it wouldn't be fair if all their sacrifice was for Johnny's. There's an argument to be made that going beyond the Black Wall is an escape as well, but one that may extinguish our humanity forever. 6 months is not a long time, but it's better than nothing, especially if we spend it with the people we love. As we return to a world engineered to break our soul, Johnny bids us one final remark.
Goodbye, V. And never stop fighting.
Farewell to the City of Dreams. If you romance someone, they'll come with you as Pan Am and the Nomads take you out of the Badlands, which is pretty nice. If you romance Pan Am like I did, congrats, we got the best ending possible. After you break through the sandstorm and cross the threshold of the Badlands, you're blessed by a quiet image of ethereal, unfading beauty. V and Pan Am are surrounded by the stars, most indiscernible from one another, but all equally bright and purposeful in their existence, just like V. By Johnny's lyrics, a thing of beauty will never fade away. If no solution is ever found, and you wither into dust and chrome in 6 months' time, your beauty will live on in the memories of the people who were touched by your goodness, especially the player, who parts ways with V in the third person for the first time in the game. V will never fade away. And that's Cyberpunk 2077, an utterly dysfunctional work of tech and code redeemed by the humanity found within. It's a confusing mess, and one that's not easy to reflect on, especially given the unbridled promise leading up to the game's release. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't have fun. So while the saga of V has come to an intermediate end, the story behind the game has not reached an honest conclusion. Not until we assess the price of destruction from within CD Projekt Red. What happened to Cyberpunk 2077? The day that I discovered The Witcher 2, a full year after watching the teaser trailer for Cyberpunk, was a day that changed my life. Not only did it introduce me to my favorite gaming franchise, my favorite book series, one of my favorite characters, and the fantasy genre as a whole, but it would eventually lead me closer to the person I am today. It wasn't until playing The Witcher 2 that I believed video games could be art, capable of stirring the human soul in deep, unseen ways. That was the power of The Witcher 2. Yet little had I known what it cost CD Projekt Red to build the game. The brink of bankruptcy, mass studio layoffs, and intense crunch, only for the game to launch in a mostly broken state that would take months of patchwork to fix. After playing The Witcher 2 and seeing trailers for Wild Hunt, I went back and played the first Witcher game. Never has a game been more rough around the edges, but I couldn't say I was disappointed, nor that I hadn't experienced one of the most enriching video game narratives ever brought to the RPG genre. Again, similar to The Witcher 2, I had no idea what it took to put that game together. 5 years of painstaking efforts and long unchecked periods of crunch, resulting in one of the most broken RPG releases of the 2000s. When The Witcher 3 was released, it was everything I was hoping it would be, and more. A flawed masterpiece that has informed just a small part of who I am today, and solidified CD Projekt Red as my favorite game developer of all time. Needless to say, the game also had its fair amount of behind-the-scenes problems. Intense, months-long crunch, and an unstable work environment, which necessitated moving all 50 developers working on Cyberpunk's early pre-production over to The Witcher 3 in the run-up to its release. For years, this has been the CD Projekt way. Set sky-high ambitions, and burn up like a shooting star trying to achieve them. It didn't seem like the worst strategy. It helped them to produce one of the most memorable gaming trilogies of all time, after all. But the toll of the Witcher trilogy's chaotic development within the studio left a lot to be desired. Of course, the type of high-crunch work environments CDPR facilitated are not uncommon in the tech industry, and definitely not in the gaming industry. But it wasn't a trend CDPR was keen on continuing.
And right now, we realize that, to look after people, to look after our team members, we really need people to look after people. If we have happy team members, they can do a better job, there's less stress, and it goes smoother.
Over the years, CDPR's managers implemented a number of policies to improve the atmosphere of the studio. A dedicated HR department, bonus salaries, and a non-obligatory crunch policy. Their intentions were certainly righteous, but had little to no effect on the outcome. On the contrary, Cyberpunk's crunch periods were more frequent and more extensive than maybe any of the Witcher games. Months of crunch leading up to the 2018 demo, months of crunch leading up to the 2019 deep dive, and a whole year of indefinite crunch for many leading up to the game's constantly delayed release date, including at least 4 to 5 months of mandatory 6-day work weeks across the studio, a baffling contradiction of CDPR's non-obligatory crunch promise. Though I have very limited personal experience with crunch to draw from, it's not difficult to imagine how thoroughly exhausted CDPR's devs must have been, utterly sapped of both the creative energy that was integral to the world they were building, and the problem-solving mentality crucial to fixing bugs. The whole ordeal begs the question, how did this happen? How could CD Projekt's executives so fundamentally mismanage their devs? Ambition alone doesn't do the explanation justice, and the poor enforcement of company policy is only a symptom of the greater problem. The real ailment at the heart of CD Projekt is the same ailment that plagues the cyberpunk world. All cyberpunk worlds. And that's greed. Indiscriminate, apathetic greed. For years, CD Projekt struggled to attain the greatness they always believed they were capable of. They had many failures along the way, but they were arguably worth it for the hard-earned spoils of The Witcher 3. And spoils might be putting it lightly. CDPR were celebrities, widely regarded as one of the greatest game developers of the modern day. Consequently, CD Projekt's executives were fueled by pride. And from that pride, ego. And from that ego, avarice. Instead of learning from their toxic development cycles of the past, CD Projekt's executives pushed for more. More innovation than what their game engine and tech could handle, more employees than their directors knew where to allocate, and more investors than they ever had before. Despite the hit that CD Projekt stocks took every time a delay was announced, they only worked harder to bounce back. While the time and effort of CDPR's devs were being mercilessly exploited behind the scenes amidst the global pandemic, the company blew full speed ahead into its months-long marketing campaign over 2020, eventually propelling them to become the most valued European game company on the stock market. Marcia Nowinski became a billionaire in 2020 after all, and he couldn't have done it without us. Thus, the poor chain of communication rampant across the studio, the ever-fluctuating vision behind the game, and the recurrent unrealistic deadlines set to CDPR's devs were all accessories to CD Projekt's greed.
The greatest crimes issue from a desire for excess and not from necessity.
The leaders of CD Projekt believed they were unstoppable. Yet, in only a matter of time, everything would stand in their way. Over the year-long crunch leading up to the game's eventual release, devs were forced to cancel features, scale down or remove chunks of Night City, and piece together fundamental mechanics, such as the Police Wanted system, in last-minute fashion. Meanwhile, external QA testing was uncovering major bugs and glitches up to as late as November, especially on Cyberpunk's practically unplayable console ports. With virtually no time to implement major fixes, CD Projekt's managers lied through their teeth, insisting that the game was much farther along in its development cycle than where it really was. At the eve of its review period, CDPR sent out PC review copies to major outlets, refused to send out any console review copies, and maintained a strict embargo that prevented reviewers from using any footage from their playthrough in their review, all with the intent of shirking off an imminent disaster. Many reviewers criticized CDPR for this move, as well as an unfettered plethora of bugs steeped throughout the PC version and in-game sequences that heavily evoked epileptic seizures. Those reviewers received death threats on social media. Fueled by months of marketing and CDPR's vague promises, the hype bubble grew unimaginably large. And when the game released, dare I say, the turns have never tabled so hard. In just one day, Cyberpunk 2077 both recouped all of its development costs on pre-orders alone and appalled its loyal fanbase, especially those who bought the game on last-gen platforms. Only a week after its release, Sony completely yanked Cyberpunk from its digital store, and Rosen Law Firm of New York filed a class-action lawsuit, accusing CDPR of failing to deliver on the promises of their game. By January, CD Projekt's stocks plummeted by more than half their original value, and another company filed a class-action lawsuit. And that 2016 grant CDPR received from the Polish government to develop dynamic AI and city technology? They've since given CDPR until the end of February to fix the bugs, or else they'll demand 10% of the company's 2020 profits. And to top it off, CDPR was issued a $75,000 fine by Sao Paulo, Brazil for a massive, illegal mural to promote their game. By all accounts, the release of Cyberpunk 2077 has been one of the worst game launches of all time.
However, there's no denying that the Cyberpunk 2077 that CD Projekt Red actually released isn't the game that it spent so long hyping up.
But it should have never fucking happened in the first place. And it makes me very disappointed from a company like CD Projekt Red.
CD Projekt Red have lost a huge amount of their reputation.
They took advantage of gamers' trust, sold over 8 million pre-order copies, and then shoved it out there in a state where most people couldn't enjoy it whatsoever.
The console version of Cyberpunk 2077 did not meet the quality standard we wanted it to meet. I and the entire leadership team are deeply sorry for this, and this video is me publicly owning up to that.
Though I've well divulged my thoughts and disappointment with Cyberpunk up to this point in the video, I genuinely wasn't sure what to think about the game for weeks of playing it. I saw the gaping holes in the experience so many players had pointed out, yet I could never admit I wasn't enraptured on some level by the game. I knew what CDPR had promised and what was lacking in the final product, yet I never completely wavered in my gratitude for what did make it into the game. The internal back and forth I struggled with only intensified the further I got into Cyberpunk, and especially in the ensuing weeks after the game's release. Where many eager fans once rushed to CDPR's defense at the mere sign of doubt or uncertainty, they were now either vindictively bashing the studio for their failures, or at the throats of console players, for whom they claimed should have expected the game to run poorly. Lists appeared across the internet compiling features and mechanics that were cut from the game. Some of it was obviously true, but a lot of it was not. More so, it was the wild hopes and expectations of desperately misled players. Meanwhile, against the hostile atmosphere of its studio, CDPR's executives promised to pay out the bonuses their employees would have received if Cyberpunk received a higher Metacritic score, regardless of how low the score would end up being. And in the face of fines, lawsuits, and the uphill battle of post-launch development, an anonymous hacker threatened to leak the source code for CDPR's games and personal internal documents from the studio on the internet, leading many on social media to either accuse CDPR of falsifying the hack or deserving the subsequent damage that the leak would cause them. Time and time again, confronted by the conflict surrounding all sides of the game, I could only ever return to two adjacent thoughts: the life-changing profundity that washed over me the first time I beat The Witcher 2, and 13-year-old me seeing the Cyberpunk teaser trailer a whole lifetime ago. my mind innocently full of unbridled excitement for what would one day come. Now standing on the other side of that fated moment, the only feeling I could possibly muster was not anger and not resent, but shame. Shame for what had become the tragedy of Cyberpunk 2077. Where I once believed CDPR was immune to the exploitative labor practices that consumed companies like EA, Ubisoft, or Konami, CD Projekt was now enveloped by the irony of their own creation. Though nowhere near as vile as Arasaka, CDPR's executives embraced the same soulless pursuit as Night City's corpos, effortlessly at work to squeeze every last drop of blood, sweat, and tears from their developers, while leading their consumers maddeningly astray behind a pro-consumer guise. Yet, the situation that unfolded through the disastrous launch of Cyberpunk has arguably grown much bigger than both CD Projekt and the gamers bearing pitch and fork against them. Never before has a game publisher been brought back down to earth more swiftly and more vehemently than CD Projekt. In watching Marcia Nowinski's apology video, a small part of me couldn't help but feel that the once humble game developer turned billionaire co-CEO had been humbled once more. It's not unlike the trial V goes through, from pursuing status through the relic, to losing it all, and then finally having the relic be the defining poison that eventually kills them. Cyberpunk was CD Projekt's relic. Now, it's their poison. That's not to say the failure of Cyberpunk will doom CDPR. Some wounds can be healed. But by the treacherous social ladder prevalent in a capitalist society, the backlash inflicted by an angry elite and angrier consumers may sear them forever. Alternatively, because of how poorly they manage their product and the people making it, CD Projekt's executives may very well deserve their downfall, especially if the financial security they've surely amassed allows them to assume zero accountability for the collateral of their greedy decisions. If this is the case, CD Projekt is not V, but Saburo Arasaka, who has garnered enough influence to survive death as an engram and return to their tyrannical throne in a new shape and form. I don't mean to vilify Marcia Nowinski or Adam Kaczynski, but they're definitely not the victims. Rather, the greatest victims in Cyberpunk's catastrophe are the developers. Though built by a crew double the size of The Witcher 3's dev team, you never need to look far in Cyberpunk for the same stroke of genius and passion that was laced throughout The Witcher 3 by its brilliant artists and designers. Marcin Przebywowicz's deadly subtle scoring, Pavel Sasko's ever-surprising quest direction, Tomasz Marchuka's gripping storytelling, the fantastic vocal performances of Cherami Lay and Gavin Dre as V, Emily Wu Zeller as Pan Am, Carla Tessara as Judy, Keanu Reeves in arguably a career-best performance, the unbreakable vision of Mike Pondsmith, and especially the unsung creativity of the droves of gameplay designers, sound designers, visual artists, animators, and mocap coordinators serve as collective proof of one of the greatest dev teams ever assembled for a video game. And yet, all of their contributions were undermined and undervalued by the toxic storm siphoned above them. For so many, the promise of taking part in one of the most ambitious open-world RPGs ever conceived, the cultivation of a masterpiece, and the pursuit of a dream was all razed to the ground by CD Projekt's sins. Now amidst the turbulent doom spiral of CDPR, these developers, who already sacrificed so much of their time, energy, and passion for Cyberpunk, are at risk of losing the most from the disaster. They will be the ones to work their asses off over the next few months to fix the game. They have the most personal data at risk in the CD Projekt hack, and if the time comes, they'll be the first to be laid off. V is not CD Projekt, but the devs of CDPR. But for that same reason, the actions of their bosses never successfully diminished the life breathed into the art they created, which is why Cyberpunk became a reflection of everything they'd been through and an invaluable story of survival. V's harrowing journey is that of an expendable cog lost in a machine, desperately fighting to prove that they're more than what they suffer through. In this way, V is indistinguishable from the people of the city they're trapped with. Because of what the city takes from people, everyone, from its boldest legends to its weakest despots, are determined to outlive their peril immortal. Not just literally, but also in the hearts and memories of as many people as possible. This is the only way anyone can convince themselves they'll matter.
See you in the major leagues, Jack.
Yet, in every other way, V is entirely and beautifully unique. Misty's tarot cards that appear throughout the world and at key junctions in the story, the deliberate emphasis on Greek mythology, from T-Bug's quotes during the heist to the copy of the Iliad found in the final room of most endings, and the Bakaneko, a symbol of rebirth that seems to follow you everywhere. Combined, these details elevate V's ordinary existence with prophetic mysticism, a driving sense of importance. Not because of the things V will do to stand out in this society, but what they'll do in spite of it.
Life is so beautifully powerful. So much more powerful than death.
And because of the connections they form along the way, V is filled with the strength and courage to survive, knowing that they don't have to shackle the weight of their burden alone. Our lives are not special because of wealth, power, or immortality, but what we do with what little time we have. Whether it's seeking out moments of escapism, spending time with the people we hold dear, or fulfilling the wants of our ever-cavernous souls, it is the very defiance to live that makes this life meaningful. So that when our time comes to pass into the afterlife, we will have the strength and composure to do so in peace, where our time will long not be forgotten, living on in the memories with whom we stayed true. That is an exceptionally powerful, existentially calming thing for a game to convey, especially amidst a time when the overwhelming loss of life has forced us all to confront our notion of mortality at one point or another. For the devs of CDPR then, Cyberpunk is a testament to the perseverance of both their own survival and their indelible artistry. That no matter what corporate machinations are at work in the world, they can never destroy pure, substantive art. Art is our escape, and by living vicariously through characters and stories, we can find freedom unfound in reality. Most of all, art, in all the forms it takes, has transformative power to not only give new meaning to our lives, but to instill empathetic, deep-rooted change in hearts of stone, so that we may finally forge a future better than our past. In the end, the tragedy of Cyberpunk 2077 is the corruption of a symbol, the betrayal of a loyal following, and the unbelievable toll a team of artists endured for the art they created, fittingly chronicled by the saga of V, an immaculate story about the necessity of connection and holding on to humanity, if not for the human suffering it cost to tell it. There's truly no romanticizing a disaster of this magnitude, nor appropriate circumstances to hope a better future lies ahead of CDPR, not until deep systemic change takes root in the company at least. But there is room for artistic gratitude, personal reflection, and the elusive magic of true escapism. By embracing these things, Cyberpunk became a deeply cathartic capsule. Where I feel trapped, depressed, and anxious about the future, Cyberpunk assures me that someday I will find a way over the horizon and outlive the chains that bind me to the past. Whenever the rest of its audience will get the chance to play the game as it was intended, maybe they'll feel the same way too. Until then, I will survive. Never to forget CD Projekt's failure, CDPR's sacrifice, and Cyberpunk 2077's final resounding proverb. Never stop fighting. Hey V, you made it to the end of the video. I always knew you did it. Sorry everyone, I thought this would be funny to pop up on the side of the credits as a Cyberpunk character, just like they do in the video game. But because of that, I don't have a typed up script as I usually do for the end of the video, at least for the last few videos. So I just wrote what I have to say on some post-it notes. So before you click off the video, stay tuned. I have some fun announcements here, including information about the next video. Also, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. This was a creatively exhaustive process, but also it was very deeply fulfilling. I really pushed myself as hard as I could to make this video, especially in the end. I've been editing it so much these past few weeks. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I have. And depending on what content comes out for Cyberpunk 2077 in the future, whether it's like DLC or expansions, I would be down to talk about this game again. But obviously time has to pass for that to happen, and the game probably has to be in a better state. So A couple announcements. I stream video games on Twitch, among other things. In fact, I streamed my entire playthrough for Cyberpunk 2077 that I used the footage from for this video on Twitch. So if you guys want to follow me on Twitch, that's twitch.tv/ArTorr, not ArTorr, CyTorr. I believe the link is like below the webcam here and in the description below, of course. Just directly click on it, hit me with a follow. And as well with that, on Wednesday, this Wednesday, March 3rd, I believe, at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'll be streaming a ArTorr community Q&A. So this is just an opportunity for everyone and anyone to come on down to the stream, hang out, ask me questions about stuff I've done in my videos, especially the Cyberpunk video, ask me questions about future videos, ask my opinions on video games, movies, Star Wars, The Last of Us, you know, whatever you want to talk about. And you don't have to ask me questions. It can just be like a free-flowing discussion with everyone in the chat and you know, me on the stream. But yeah, that'll be on Wednesday. So I hope to see you all there. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I'll post another announcement about it in our community tab before we do that. You guys should follow me on Twitter. I tweet updates about videos as well as my thoughts on pop culture, media, stuff like that. A little bit of politics. You can follow me on Instagram. That's also at Parks Harmon. Did I mention my Twitter handle was at Parks Harmon? I don't know. I did. It's below the webcam. I don't usually post on Instagram, but a bunch of you have followed me recently and actually DM'd me. A bunch of you DM'd me about videos, which is amazing. I'm so grateful. Yeah, I'll try to start posting now that a bunch of people are following me. So follow me on Instagram. And for those of you who use Discord, it would mean the world to me if you join our community server, the Artorium, which is basically just a great big old place for a bunch of like-minded, respectful fans of pop culture, Star Wars, video games, to hang out and just talk about stuff and maybe share stuff and also collaborate on stuff. There's a lot of really creative people in the Discord, and I'm in love with everyone I've met in a platonic way. Yeah, it's an awesome community. We just crossed over 100 members, so you know, please consider joining. We're always looking for new people, and we always want to expand the reach of the server and the net positivity that we can bring out of it. That would really mean a lot to me. And then before I talk about the next video, I just want to give you all a sincere thank you for just the support from the last 2-3 months. It's actually been insane. When I uploaded my last video, the Miles Morales video, which was back in December, we had less than 1,000 subscribers on the channel. And for those of you who subscribed like in the last few weeks, this fact will be as mind-blowing to you as it is for me. Literally, within the last 2-3 months, we've gained like 10,000 subscribers. It's insane. And I could not be more grateful, you know, for as someone who likes to create things and hopes that the things I create can connect with at least someone, you know, who needs it. To have an audience like this, even at this size, I can't express my gratitude enough. So deep, profound thank you to all of you for your support. I hope I don't disappoint you in the future, and I hope you're excited for all the future content we're gonna do, which, including the next video. I'm not gonna tell you what it is yet, because I've actually so far been able to keep it a secret. But I will say it's a video that I've been requested to make several times. That's all I'm gonna say. Thank you, everyone. You're all beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your week. March, beginning of March now. What the heck is that? COVID anniversary's coming up? Yeah. All right, everyone. Peace out. Have a good one.